Welcome to the 2020 Hope Global Forum's annual meeting. America on Reset, Healing a Nation, Opportunity for All.
Good afternoon. It's a real honor to be joined with all of you today in this event. As a Fed president, I'm not sure my star power can match up with many of my fellow speakers, including Deepak Chopra and T.D. Jakes. But I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled to rub shoulders with them, even if it's just virtually. But on a serious note, Operation Hope's mission of ensuring financial uplift and economic inclusion for all Americans could not be more important or more timely given present circumstances. So I am really excited, truly excited, and frankly flattered to be part of this great series of events this week. I'm also excited to sketch out a few thoughts on our present circumstances and to have a chat with John Bryant. But before I can get to that, there's something else I have to do. We call this the standard Fed disclaimer. The views I express today are mine alone and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else in the Federal Reserve System or on the Federal Open Market Committee. There, I'm covered. So, it is no secret to anybody that we are in the midst of twin crises, the likes of which none of us have ever seen. COVID-19 has sickened tens of millions of our fellow Americans and killed hundreds of thousands of them. And the virus, unfortunately, is still circulating widely through the country. The pandemic has also spurred an economic downturn so severe that the second quarter of this year, we experienced the sharpest contraction of gross domestic product in recorded American history. Millions of Americans lost their jobs and millions more had their hours cut. And we see these scars everywhere, in the miles-long lines at food banks that indicate massive suffering, and in the shuttered storefronts and restaurants that now dominate so many of our commercial districts that just a few months ago were bustling. It's also no secret that the effects of this unprecedented crisis have fallen most harshly on those who are least able to bear them. Racial minorities, particularly Hispanic and Black Americans, have been affected by both the health crisis and the economic crisis. They have been affected more than any other groups. Hispanic and Black Americans have been sickened by COVID-19 at a rate disproportionate to their population. They've also died at a higher rate. Those same groups are also more likely to hold jobs that one can't perform at home, which is probably one of the reasons that their infection rates are higher than other groups. They're also more likely to have held jobs that have either been replaced by automation or that have simply been eliminated. Make no mistake about this, this is a five-alarm fire. The one thing I really admire about Operation Hope is that it doesn't just call itself a nonprofit organization. It calls itself a for-purpose organization. I think the Federal Reserve is also a for-purpose organization. As the nation's central bank, Congress has mandated us to provide for maximum employment and stable prices. That is, lots of jobs and low inflation. But another purpose I believe we can work towards is narrowing the yawning racial disparities that continue to plague our society. So, how do we do that? So, given that I am a Fed president, you probably guessed that I might say monetary policy. And I do think that's part of the solution. That's why I'm pleased that in late August, following a nearly 2-year review, the Fed announced a shift in our approach to fulfilling that dual mandate, that mandate I just mentioned. Here's the upshot. No longer will we head off higher inflation by preemptively raising interest rates before we have achieved full employment. Moreover, after long periods of sub 2% inflation, as we now find ourselves in and have been for a while, we will accept periods of above 2% inflation. Now, tolerating the risk of slightly higher inflation, in our view, and in particular my view, is worth it if it helps us achieve our employment goals. That's really important because one of the encouraging trends of the pre-COVID economy was that economic gains, at least on a limited basis, were finally being enjoyed by lower wage workers, a disproportionate percentage of whom are racial minorities. Now, look, we still had a very long way to go, of course, but it's clear, and it's very clear to me, that we must achieve full employment if we're going to make progress on this issue. We also need to do a better job of transitioning workers into careers that offer solid pay and strong future prospects. Now, here at the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, we've been thinking hard, and we've been thinking hard about this for a while, about how to get workers into what we call opportunity occupations. That is, jobs that pay the median wage or better and that don't require a college degree. Now, I'd like to share the results of just one study we've done, because I really think these results are exciting and may lead us to action that we can take now. The study began when the Philadelphia Fed researchers, in partnership with the Cleveland Fed, asked one question: how do we transition workers in jobs most likely to disappear into stable, higher wage positions? Now, they came up with an ingenious idea. They looked at the skill sets of people who are holding those jobs that are most at risk of disappearing. They then matched those skills to jobs that pay at least 10% more than their current wage, and again, that don't require a 4-year college degree. I think the findings were incredibly encouraging. Looking at 33 metro areas nationwide, they found that nearly half of lower wage employment can be paired with at least one higher paying occupation requiring similar skills. For transitions connecting the most similar occupations identified in the study, the pay differences really are significant, with an average bump in wages, annual wages, of almost $15,000, a 49% increase in salary. That's pretty exciting. So the opportunities, how do we get there? The opportunities for public-private partnerships to initiate these kind of transitions, I think, are obvious, and they are key to making this happen. I'm proud to say that the Philadelphia Fed helped launch one such partnership between Comcast and Philadelphia Works, our local job workforce development board. That's just one project, of course, but if it proves to be replicable across cities and industries, I really think we can move the needle on this problem. There is a system-wide effort within the Federal Reserve that has defined racial equity as, I quote, just and fair inclusion in an economy in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential, and race can no longer predict life outcomes. That's a pretty lofty goal, of course, but a really profound one, I think. The idea that we can one day decouple race from life outcomes. If we get there, I know that Operation Hope will have played a significant role. So really, thank you for having me, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion with John Bryant.
Hi, this is John Hope Bryant. Welcome to the Hope Global Forum 2020 annual meeting, a meeting focused on America on Reset, Healing a Nation, Opportunity for All. I'm honored to be with you and to be with this incredible gentleman who is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, one of the 12 Fed presidents in the country, member of the Open Market Committee, a leader of the portfolio within the Fed that I am most aligned to and interested in, focused on the uplift of the underserved. President Patrick Harker is a vibrant, high-frequency academic mind. I believe he is still the youngest professor or academic at Wharton ever to have an endowed professorship. He is an expert in operations and transferred that, what I call left brain intellect, into a role as the president of the Federal Reserve. And if you're president of the Federal Reserve, people don't understand what the Fed does really, but uh, they are as important to the stability of our democracy as the right to vote and as the executive branch. And I believe the Fed's response to this crisis has kept Wall Street solid and sane, and money flowing, because the Fed window stayed open and confidence has been communicated. We need to now translate that philosophy from Wall Street into Main Street, in my opinion. These are my comments, not his. So I'm going to push a little bit on this conversation. I think he is the person that can handle it for sure. And it is notable the Fed chairman recently made some comments in the last week that were very encouraging about historic changes to, I think, the Fed charter even, which I'd like to get into, that would speak to this 400-year-old social justice reckoning of Black America and those who've been left behind. Please join me in welcoming the Fed President Harker.
Thank you very much, John. And please call me Pat.
My mother raised me well, but if you say so, I'll try.
Yeah, please do that. Thank you.
So I want you to do something unnatural here, and you're the Fed president. You've got to have a certain amount of emotional detachment from what's going on here. But my sense is that you didn't just accidentally get into this area of focusing on what I call the bottom half of America's economic potential. That this means something to you. This wasn't an assignment you just were appointed to. It means something to you. And this moment, in my opinion, in America, which I think is historic, means something to you. Can you? This is a guess. We don't know each other intimately in that way. But my sense from what I've researched is that you're a man of what I call high frequency. You think and you care. Can you respond to that?
Yeah. So I grew up right next to Camden, New Jersey, so I really understood in a lower middle class neighborhood next to Camden. My mother was born in Camden. The whole family was there in Camden. So I get I think a little bit. You can't understand completely until you're in somebody else's shoes completely. But I got some sense growing up of what the challenges were that people faced. And then when I got to the Fed, when I was able to get to the Fed, I was really encouraged by, in fact, attracted by the work that the Philly Fed's been doing, actually for decades, around the issues of lower income communities. We've been doing for almost 2 decades a conference every other year, a major national conference called Reinventing Our Communities, where we bring together policymakers, community organizers, academics, all focused on the issue of how do you move the needle in community by community to bring people into the middle class. Right, that's the goal. We doubled down on that recently at the Philly Fed with something we call the Economic Growth and Mobility Project. And there's 3 legs to the work we're doing there. And this all grows out of the Community Reinvestment Act in the 1970s, where we had to build expertise around low to moderate income communities so we could advise banks and supervise banks with respect to their investments in those communities. So the 3 legs of this stool that we're working on are creating good jobs, what we call opportunity occupations, jobs that get you into the middle class. That is pay above median wages. We know what they are. We know where they are by geography. And now the next question is, how do you get the people the skills to get those jobs? Right. And then third is I broadly classify it as infrastructure, housing, transportation, childcare, broadband access. Because if you can't get to the job or the job can't get to you, you don't have a job. And what we did is took those 3 stools, and we conduct research all the time at the Fed, but we married that with what we call research and action labs, where we actually work with the community to develop a solution that we think is replicable across the country. I'm really excited about this work.
And do you see that speaking to this moment? How do you see that work speaking to this moment? We have a global health pandemic, worse than 120 years, a national economic crisis. Thank God the Fed has stepped in, and a social justice reckoning, a 400-year-old social justice reckoning for Black America in 3 months.
Yep.
Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling fulfilled? Where are you at?
I'm actually, in a strange way, look, the crisis is incredibly hurtful to so many people across our economy and our society. These crises that you laid out, all three of them, and they're all interrelated to a large extent, because the people who've gotten hurt most in this crisis are those of Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. We know that. We've documented that. It's also accelerated trends we're also already seeing with automation and so forth that we're putting some of those jobs at risk. So while you're in this crisis moment, I think I'm actually somewhat optimistic about this. And I know that sounds strange, but I
No,
think
I
this is the moment where we can address some of these fundamental problems we've had in our society for a long time. So I mentioned the work we're doing in the Economic Growth and Mobility Project, but we've now really put a sharp lens of racial equity on all that work. And we've done that in Philadelphia, and we actually have done that across the system. And I have the privilege of chairing the committee that oversees that work across the system. And we call it the Racial Equity Learning Community. And this is a community across the Federal Reserve that's focused on how do we do work, and people are doing different things in different geographies, right? What we do in Philadelphia is going to be different than, say, Kansas City. But it's
right.
all focused on how do you take this moment to address these concerns, get people the jobs they deserve, and get them the stability and the respect that they deserve in our society.
Did your work on that committee that you chair have anything to do with what the Fed Chairman Powell came out with last week around the Fed's
Yeah,
charter?
yeah, so not directly, although it is related to a broader issue. So when we were coming out of the last economic crisis, the Great Recession, and that's when I joined the Fed during
Mhm.
that recovery from the Great Recession. We kept thinking that we couldn't get unemployment any lower without letting inflation run off past our 2% target. It never ran off past our 2% target. And we kept getting unemployment lower and lower. And we started bringing people that we thought were structurally unemployed. That is, they were not going to get a job. They started to come off the sidelines. Companies started to think creatively about public-private partnerships to get more workers.
Yep.
And so what we saw, right, was that this was starting to work. People were starting to make progress. And we started to see the gap between, say, Black and Hispanic workers and white workers, or the average, starting to narrow. Unfortunately, it wasn't closed, but it started to narrow. So at that moment, I think, at least for me, I saw, wow, if we can just bring unemployment down as the base level, then we can start to work on these things I've discussed, how to create these public-private partnerships, how to do work to get people into these middle-class jobs. And this is one where I'm actually pretty passionate about this. Go back to your earlier question when we started. So I'm a first-generation college kid. I'm the son of a pipe fitter and steam fitter. My whole family were pipe fitters and steam fitters. And, I think and I'm a former university president. I'm the former
Right.
president of the University of Delaware. So this is going to be a
Right.
strange thing for a university president to say, but not everybody needs to go to a four-year college, or at least not right away. We need to
Mhm.
bring honor and dignity back to the kind of work, the trades, and other things. And you hear, even in this recession right now, home building is still taking off. People still can't find electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters. So we need to hold up and honor those professions.
That's right. And I mean, and those people are making five-figure incomes, high five-figure incomes,
Yeah,
in some cases six-figure incomes, with a skill that's not going away anytime soon.
right.
Uh, you
And they can
can't.
be entrepreneurial. They can run their own firm. They can be entrepreneurial. So we need to really bring this back.
Well, and I'm saying this for the purpose of those who may not know this. You know this, and I want to go back to I made this comment about the Fed chairman twice and didn't explain what it is. Maybe you can explain what's going on within the Fed system. Frankly, it's very quickly, what does the Fed do? And you're not going down to the Fed bank to cash a check, everybody. But they make it possible you can cash a check at the bank.
Right.
But what does the Fed do, and what is it that you guys are contemplating at the Fed board with regard to not modernizing but upgrading the software of how you think about lifting all boats? So let me come
Right.
back to that. I wrote something recently called the New Marshall Plan, and it's got a lot of lift. And one of the pieces in there was massive internships at scale, massive apprenticeships at scale, and encouraging corporations and companies to get credit for doing that, and a focus on small business, because if you can't get a job in the suites, then you need to be able to work yourself up from the streets, like all
Mm-hmm.
immigrants came into America.
Mm-hmm.
And half, of course, of all employment in this country are small businesses. Uh,
Yep.
and 96% of all Black-owned businesses don't have an employee, so we need to strengthen them. Okay, so I'm now coming back around to my point. Can you explain a little bit about what you're doing? I think I see us sort of meeting in the middle here. How does fiscal policy and what you're doing there affect the guy and the lady on the street?
So we're monetary policy. Fiscal policy would be Congress, but the monetary policy is what we're known for. We set the interest rate for the country. Well, we actually set technically something called the Fed funds rate, which is how banks lend to each other. But that's really the base of all the interest rates in the country. So keeping that low, the economy tends to accelerate. And so we decided to keep that low until we actually see us reach full employment and get our inflation target of inflation above our 2% target. We've been hovering below that. There's a lot of reasons why 2% makes sense. So we've committed to do that, that we will let inflation run maybe a little hot so we can get unemployment numbers down. That's the big change. But the other two areas of the Fed that people may not know about, that's the one area, obviously that's the headline area in the Federal Open Market Committee on which I serve. The second area, though, is we supervise and regulate banks. And a big part of that is making sure that consumer compliance is there, and also working with banks to start addressing some of, in this particular case, some of the structural problems we know we have. One of the areas that I've heard loud and clear, because I was privileged to co-chair a group with the Greater Philadelphia Chamber, looking at the financial services sector, trying to bring back the economy in the Greater Philadelphia region, not just back, but better, right, and more equitable. And one of the areas that's we heard loud and clear is access to banking for small businesses, particularly minority-owned small businesses. And we saw that in that the PPP loans, that is the loans that were given out by the Small Business Administration, many small businesses didn't have access to those because they didn't have existing banking relationships. So the banks didn't know them, they didn't know the banks. So we need to break down that barrier. And I think we can do that through our conversations with banks on trying to understand their issue, trying to understand the issues that the businesses have, and other nonprofit organizations like CDFIs that are existing in that ecosystem. And the third area that I highlighted a little bit is our community development work. And we have active programs all across the Fed trying to move the needle on low, moderate income communities to bring them into the middle class. So that work in combination, I think, can actually make a big difference. We don't make loans, as you said, we don't make loans to individuals or companies. We're the bank's bank. And so we're the bank to banks and to the federal government. We're the fiscal agent for the US Treasury. But that said, I still think we can be an incredibly important partner with the other parts of government, organizations like yours and businesses to collectively make a difference here.
Brilliant. And so you've got these different arms helping to keep stability and inspire growth on a stabilized and sustainable basis. And with regard to interest rates, help me understand. You're trying to keep the interest rates low, and there's been some discussion of the appreciation that African Americans and others who are left behind, if the economy starts taking off and then you raise interest rates, you may actually shut the door on the people of color who have not yet got on the ladder. And there's some discussions at the Fed now, at the Federal Reserve Board level. I'm talking about the Board of Governors now, as the Fed level in Washington, not just sort of laddering this with the Fed banks, about extending that period of lower interest rates. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So what we're willing to do is let inflation run a little bit above 2% for a while. As we start to see, there's an inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation, right? So If inflation's running high, that means more people can get jobs because the economy is doing well, right? Because
Right.
people are buying and selling goods and services. So
Right.
we're willing to tolerate slightly higher inflation than we normally would so we can get more people into work. And again, we want to go back. It's hard to remember pre-COVID, right? We're all having problems with that. But if
Right.
you remember back to that economy, we were making progress. It wasn't perfect. We had a long way to go, but let's get back to that and start getting more people, as you said, onto the ladder.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to retell that story, you said it once, but I wanted to say it in a different way because people are ashamed to admit they have no idea what the FDIC does. They
Sure.
have no idea what the Federal Reserve does. They have no idea what the Wall Street Journal is saying. And they look, I'm educated, I've been to college, I should know this stuff, but they don't. And I want to demystify it. So I'm sorry, I will take you back through that thing because I want people to understand that when you adjust interest rates, it affects inflation, and all that affects, I believe, job creation or sustainability thereof,
Yep.
and access to capital. I think the Fed overall, the Federal Reserve system, in the 12 Fed banks, and the Treasury, Secretary of the Treasury Department, has done an incredible job in the midst of this crisis. Most of it invisible to the people. Is there anything in your toolbox that you would like to see further emphasized? And I know we have to be careful here. You don't want to signal. But are there things or programs that you plan that you can announce here in the next 12 to 24 months? I think we're in a third Reconstruction. This is from my own perspective. I think the first Reconstruction was after the Civil War, and blacks got freedom, physical freedom. And the second Reconstruction was during the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King basically picked up where Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass left off, and that was about the right to vote, political empowerment. And I think the third Reconstruction is between now and 2030, and that's going to be about economic empowerment, wealth creation, bridging the wealth and income inequality gap, social justice through economic uplift. I think we're sitting in a moment in history right now.
Yep.
What things that you can share? Well, first of all, do you think that's a silly idea? But what things do you can share right now that you are focused on to help to lean against the wheel so that we can recover back, not just back as you said, but better?
Yeah. So two things. One, you mentioned our stance on monetary policy. Let's keep rates low. Let's get unemployment down, and let's get people back to work, and everybody back to work. And then the kind of work we talked about with our economic growth and mobility project. But where we really want to focus is on this racial equity learning community. It's going to vary by district, but we want to be a trusted resource for the communities that we are in to help. For example, we just conducted training programs for communities who said, we want to do something here, we don't know what to do. I'm sure you hear the same thing. So we have expertise, we can bring experts to bear. This is a moment where I think that people are aligned, institutions are aligned. And so we want to be that trusted resource, fact-based trusted resource to bring to the table to help make a difference and really make this the America we all want to be in.
Yeah. You make me proud, sir, to be an American and to be a human being. And I can tell that you care, which means a lot to me.
Well, thank you.
It's been said people don't really care or listen to or remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. And I think that people listening to this feel there's somebody in a position of power that cares about the little guy and sees that all wealth came from poor people, all legitimate wealth came from poor people who started something small and turned it into something big. And maybe the Fed system and the Federal Reserve banks in particular can become these ladders, these bridges of fact-based information, and as you say, an honest broker. In this time where institutional credibility is at risk, and let's turn this rainbow. Let's turn this storm into a rainbow. Let's create rainbows after storms, and create an opportunity from all this. And I think that's what you're doing. And we look forward to working with you even further and stronger in this regard. Do you want to leave people with a hopeful note? I think you just did. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I mean, I think that's it. It's all of us working together, doing what we can. We can actually make this happen. This is in our hands to do. We can make this happen.
And the last thing I want people to hear is I know that people watching this may not think it was extraordinary that the Fed president talked about race in a racial lens and whatever. This is actually quite extraordinary. This is not what they do. It's not what they've done. But they're upgrading their own software. They're leaning in, and we're trying to. I think I have confidence we're going to meet in the middle here and create a bridge to opportunity. So thank you. Please give your colleagues my best and let the work begin.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.
I do when my love is away? Does it world for you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. What do I do when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. What do I do when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. do when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. What do I do when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. What do I do when my love is away? Does it worry you to be alone? How do I feel at the end of the day? Are you sad cause you're on your own? I can't find a little help from my friends. Oh, I'm gonna try a little help from my friends.